What are the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence over an extended period of time?
All right, John. It's so great to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome.
Thank you, Ryan.
To get started, in this case, since we have a lot of mutual friends, I reached out to Steve Wasick, or as you call him, Stevie Wasick, as you write about in your book, Let Them Lead. And I said, what are a few things about John that I need to know that I won't read on the internet? Because pretty much everything's out there. And he's like, yes, here we go. So I just want to start with a couple of those. They're pretty much all good, but there may be one that he told me to razz you a little bit. Are you cool?
I'll put the helmet on. Here we go.
Okay. So I won't get into all of them, or maybe I'll save some for later. But he said, you do have to razz him about being the worst player in the history of Huron hockey. He's played in 86 games and he scored 0 goals. So I need to ask you about the fact that you sound like maybe one of the greatest coaches ever. Yet
you're very kind.
Yet as a we'll get to that statement, which I think has a lot of truth to it. I wouldn't have said it, but yet as a player, you didn't score any goals. Or did you play goalie? Were you on defense? I don't know hockey as well. But what tell me more about you, and then also that transition from being a player who didn't score goals to being an excellent coach.
Well, you're very kind on that one, of course. But the first part is undeniably true, empirically true, Ryan. And I know I'm a big fan of your podcast, of course, track you on Twitter as well. But your guests tend to drop numbers pretty ably, I think. They like empirical evidence. Well, I've got some. When I say, when Stevie, and I call him Stevie because when I met him, he's a 9th grader, not even. He's 4'10". He's at my elbow in the team photo. I'm only 5'8", Ryan. So this guy was called Stevie by everybody. So now, of course, he's Vice President Wasick. So I have to adjust to that, of course.
He's the man. I love Wasick. He's a good dude.
He's got a good thing going, no question. Yeah. Great guy.
Yeah.
But yes, my record is 86 games in Huron uniform, Ann Arbor Huron, that is. Home of the River Rats. Not making that up, by the way. That actually is our mascot. Across the street, we have Ann Arbor Pioneer High School. That's the famous one. That's Jim Harbaugh and Ken Burns, the documentary filmmaker, Bob Seger, the musician, Jack Lausma, the astronaut. It goes on and on like this. And then we got the River Rats. So we're the other school. That's wrong side of the tracks for us. But 86 games, 3 years I played. Back then, it's all you're allowed. No 9th graders in high school. I dressed in every game. I played in every game. And I managed not to score a single goal. And Ryan, I played forward. I played right wing. It's my job to score goals. Now, I have to tell you, though, it is actually a family record. My brother was also on the team. He also failed to score a goal. He likes to point out that he played goalie, but we all got excuses, right? So.
Okay. Wow. So how about this move?
First one's true.
This move from, because I found like in the sport my background's in is football.
Of course.
But when you look at some of the most effective coaches in the sport, they weren't the star quarterback. They were the backup quarterback, or they were somebody who they really had to grind. They developed grit and resilience. They had to know the playbook inside and out. They had to be watching film because probably their skills weren't enough for them alone to be a good enough player. And then that work ethic probably is what's led them to be great coaches. Do you feel some of that, and from your playing career to then shifting to a coach?
I feel all of it. You're dead right. And I've got a section in the book where I mentioned that the 4 greatest managers, coaches of all time in each sport: Bill Belichick in football, obviously in baseball, Casey Stengel, and it goes on from there. In hockey, it's Scotty Bowman, who never got to the NHL. Casey Stengel said about baseball, I was not very successful in baseball as it is a game of skill, but you get more World Series than anybody else. It is very rare for the great ones in a sport to become the great managers, coaches, and so on. Wayne Gretzky failed. Magic Johnson failed. The list is very long. And I think the reason for that is simple, is that the desire is so much greater for somebody who's a grinder. Basically, that's part of it. Second of all, as you pointed out, is the backup quarterback. The guy at the clipboard is watching everything. He's taking everything in. and that often works to your advantage as well. So was my formula, certainly. Also, I talked to Herb Brooks quite a bit, the architect of the 1980 Miracle on Ice Olympic hockey team that beat the Soviets. He was the last man cut from the 1960 Olympic team. If you've seen Miracle, you know that story, of course. And I asked him, I said, would you have been so driven to coach the 80 team and drive them the way you did if you had made the 60 team, he was cut with 2 weeks to go, and earned the gold medal that all your teammates earned? And he thought about it. And he said, nobody ever asked me that, but no, there's no way. He was driven for 20 years to fill that hole in his heart. And that is partly my drive as well.
When I think about that, if we transition it to the business world, John, let's say somebody is the number one sales professional in their division or in their company even for 5 years, and they're saying, okay, now I want to be a manager. I want to be a leader within this business. I want to get promoted. How do we translate this to that world? How do we make sure that top producer, the number one rep, which usually that person gets the interview, they don't always get hired, but a lot of times they do, because you're like, well, they're really good at the job. Let's just give them the next job and the next job. And then we hit the Peter principle, right? Where we're always promoted till we reach the level of incompetence. And I want to think about, how do we avoid that? How do we take the best of the best at their craft and help them be good leaders, be good managers when we do promote them?
You've hit the nail on the head. If Magic Johnson is not a great coach for the LA Lakers, who cares? It does not affect us in business.
Right.
But you've pulled out the principle that does apply here. And to be clear, this book, of course, is about coaching a high school hockey team, but it's not about high school hockey, as you already know. It's about managing people, leading people. And the principle there, and it's the very, very common mistake, not only in business, but also academia, in medicine, and so on. Your top surgeon becomes the chair of the department. Your top salesperson becomes the sales manager. And it goes on. Your top professor becomes the chairman or the dean. These are often mistakes, because the very skills you need to be the top salesperson don't always translate to leadership. You have to be, frankly, a little selfish to be a top salesperson. Often you have to be very aggressive. You have to be numbers oriented. These are all good things in a salesperson. I'm not denigrating that in any way. And you have some of those things, of course, for a sales manager. But you also need compassion. You need to figure out how to motivate the second half of the roster, if you will. And if you've been in that second half of the roster, you know how to motivate those guys. It can't just be the stars. So what we did here in hockey, and that includes our man Stevie Wasik, our captains in my 4 years there, my captains only once was the leading scorer. And usually they weren't close. When Stevie was named a captain by his teammates, he was the 14th leading scorer out of 23 or so as a junior. And as a senior, second line center, he was the 6th leading scorer. But he was a damn good captain. We didn't put the C in his jersey for leading scorer. We put the C in there to lead. And likewise, my first captain, my second captain, only my third captain was the leading scorer. So we've got to see it here on is because we picked you to lead. Don't pick the sales guy to be the sales manager based on sales. Find your best leader and pick that person, not always your top salesperson.
What about the reason that the top person gets chosen usually a quarterback gets voted captain? I know that what that's like. But there's a respect element. There's a saying like players know, right? Players know, like players know who's good. Aaron Rodgers is going through this right now. Like basically, I know better than the front office, and in his case, actually, I think he does. But besides that, players know who's good and who they respect and who they want to follow. How do you manage that? Like if someone's 7th on the stack rankings and they get promoted and what about the 1 and the 2 and the 3, especially if they went for the job? How do you manage that aspect when it comes to leadership roles, getting promoted, when it's viewed as like, oh, look at the email comes out that so-and-so got promoted, and the person who's at the top gets really upset potentially because they wanted to do that job. So how do you manage that aspect of it?
That's a great question. And you will get that. Obviously, look, anytime there's a prize, if you didn't get it, the guys who did not get the prize are not going to be thrilled. And you have to explain it. Hopefully, what we had in our case, we had a 4-month tryout basically in the off season to find out who was going to be captain, and it was voted on by the players. The coaches also got 1 vote each, but I never ever fudged it. And you'll appreciate this, of course, from your career as well as your brother's. It's Bacon's law of the locker room. You can fool the media, you can fool the fans, you can't fool the guys in your locker room.
Right.
They know exactly who you are. You want to find out what Tom Brady's like? Forget all the ads and all that. Talk to his teammates at Michigan 20-some years ago. A.J. Hawk, same thing, of course. The Buckeyes, talk to his teammates. They'll tell you who he was. You already got the Stevie on my behalf, so you learn about that too. They know who you are, so as long as it's fair, you can say, look, I get that you're not happy. All right, why didn't your peers name you captain? Why didn't that happen? And let's break that down. What can we be stronger going forward at doing? Furthermore, we always had layers of leadership. We had 1 C or 2 C's for captain. We had 1 or 2 A's for assistant captains. Then we had the layer of seniors, and you're a football guy. You know how important that is. Seniors run your team for a lot of good reason. Then you got juniors on down. It's what I call layers of leadership. So you can always lead in our team, whether you got a C or not. In fact, you have to lead. Some of our best leaders, Ross Gimble, for example, in the book, was not named captain. 4 years later, he's captain at Tufts University, which impressed me more than being the MVP. He's a hell of a player, right? But now he learned how to lead, and that's what I like the most. So we had a phrase in our team, Ryan, you'll appreciate. We have a name for those who lead by example. They're called sophomores. All that means is you know your job and you can do your job. Is it essential? Absolutely. Do you have to lead by example? Yes. You and all other leaders have to lead by example. But that's not nearly all you have to do. Your junior year, you have to know your job, do your job, and know everybody else's job. And your senior year, you got to know your job, do your job, all right, know everyone else's job, and help them do their jobs better. You don't just get your canoe through the portage. You get your canoe through and then go back and help the other guys with their canoes. That's what a real leader has got to do. So there are a lot of opportunities to lead, and things can always change. So keep at it. It's not static. The military does a great job of this, in my opinion.
Yeah, that reminds me so much of my high school coach, Ron Ollery, who I love dearly, and he's still remains a great friend and mentor. Where I remember between my freshman and sophomore year, he's like, look, last year you didn't say much. You called the cadence, you called the play, and you executed the offense, and that was fine. Now that you've had a year to do that, you have to start finding your voice. You have to start becoming a leader. You can't just execute the offense. You have to do more. And then as I went from sophomore to junior, okay, this is your team now. And we got elected captain as a junior by my teammates from the secret vote, all of that. And then senior year, even more compounded. And I feel like this could happen too in the business world as well, where you kind of get your feet wet, you're into it. You just go execute, you do your job, you lead by example, and you realize like each year you kind of have to do more and more and more if you want to be a leader. And I think leadership is not necessarily a job title. Leadership is a choice. You choose if you want to be a leader, regardless if anyone else has given you a title. And I feel like that's what you're talking about when it comes to the stages of growth and having to do more and more when it comes to leadership.
You, of course, Ryan, nailed it. And I've heard your podcast with more famous guys than me. You do a great job of finding out what makes this guy tick and what he has to offer. And that's what we're talking about here, of course. It's not enough to run your own game. Your quarterback, that's great, clearly vital, almost automatically, probably more than any other position, any other sport. If you're the quarterback and you're not a leader, your team's going to have problems. And I can't say that about a right winger. I can't say that about a goalie. I can't say that about a relief pitcher. But in that is the field general. That is the voice of the coach on the field. So that guy's got to lead. But as you pointed out, it's not enough just to do your job. You got to be aware of everyone else's job. And one thing Tom Brady does not get enough credit for, I think, is how he lifts those around him. Michael Jordan had that skill. Magic Johnson had that skill. They might not have been great coaches, but they were great leaders, clearly, for their team. And I've talked to a lot of guys, by the way, who played with Magic Johnson, and they said, man, forget the coach. What you don't want is Magic's glare in the huddle around the foul line, because that's not going to go well. So everybody knew who was running that team, but that's how it goes. It's not just your game, it's everyone else's game.
You mentioned Tom Brady. I just thought of this came up because my brother does a daily show with Pat McAfee. I don't know
Oh yeah.
So if you've ever seen, but Pat's a really thoughtful, he's really funny, but he said the reason that every team should have won after Tom Brady when he was a free agent was because he will lift up every aspect of your organization just by being in the building. Your athletic trainers will be better. Your strength and conditioning will be better. Everything about your entire organization will be lifted by his presence. He's that impactful. That team was not very good, the Tampa Bay Bucks, before he got there, and they won the Super Bowl the very first year. It shows, I think, from a leadership perspective, if you identify and you can find and have like a talent scout's eye, I mean, you can change the trajectory of your organization in business by hiring people like that, by bringing them on board, because they have the potential to lift the levels of everyone else. And I think as leaders, that's one of our jobs, right? Is to identify and find people like that and then provide the platform and the space for them to go to work, which the Bucks did for Brady. And then you see the results. And I just feel like that's another critical component to, like you say, letting them lead. I feel like that's a big part of it as well.
Exactly. And look, I mean, you played college ball. Your brother, of course, played for the Packers, won a Super Bowl there. At the NFL level and really at the Fortune 500 level, what are the margins? Everyone's got good products. Everyone's got good management. I mean, you hold an advantage for a few months, maybe, if you got a good idea. It's constant, and you talk to these guys all the time. I do as well. And it's brutal. So what's going to be the difference? The difference is the guys who, if it's you versus your team, if it's you're the leader and it's adversarial and I need to motivate everybody out here, you're done by lunch. You're not going to win. It's over. There's more of them than you. If it's adversarial, they're going to start undermining you and cutting corners, and they're playing Sudoku during the day on their computers. They're not paying attention. You've lost them. What you really want to instill, if you can, is and your high school coach clearly had this internal sort of policing where they simply don't want to disappoint you. And that's based on trust, respect, and really affection. And one of the points I make in this book is that, look, it's like being a dad. I became a dad 5.5 years ago. He's downstairs. That's why I'm, by the way, here in my bedroom, because my kid is quarantined in my office. So it's one of the sacrifices you make. Look, the kid can say when he's 3 or 4, I hate you. Well, as a parent, you can't turn around and say, yeah, I hate you back. It doesn't work. You can't say that. So your people will not always like you, but you got to like them anyway. And if you don't like them, you're going to have a problem. But all those things come in, and what you hope to create is a situation where they simply don't want to disappoint you. And then your culture becomes their culture, and now they want to maintain it for themselves. It's not just the coach we're trying to please. All right, this is our thing. And with a little guidance, they will start doing that work for the team, not just you. And that's when you're very hard to stop.
I'm with you, because I've had that feeling so much where I would do anything not to let that person down. And that stemmed from the fact, I think it stemmed out of love, meaning I sensed they had a love for me, a care for me and my teammates, my peers. They wanted and did everything they could to get the most out of us. And this is something you write about in this book, Let Them Lead, which is really good here. Beautiful cover too. But you talk about the fact of that just the title alone shows you're setting the team up to be empowered, to be player-led in a sense, but the coach, the leader, has to create that environment. And so this is beautiful when it's working. Can you share how to go from, oh, great idea, John, I want to do this with my sales team, or I want to do this with my team at work. How do we go from idea to this, quote, letting them lead philosophy in the real world with an actual team in business?
Great question, which is kind of the question, really. I would say this. There are currently two popular ways of going about this. One is the command and control, my way or the highway. These are the standards, boom, boom, boom. Do it or don't do it, and that's all there is to it. The other way is, as Stevie Wozniak likes to say, it's kombucha machines, it's beanbag chairs, it's, casual Fridays and Taco Tuesdays and all this cool stuff, and that's all wonderful. The problem is, Ryan, neither one works. In the first case, they're going to tune you out. The modern employee is not going to put up with that very much. Look, your brother with the Packers, Vince Lombardi was no longer coaching that team. You can't do it that way anymore. So, and the second thing, beanbag chairs and kombucha machines, as Stevie says, What that gets you is people who like beanbag chairs and kombucha machine. I'm not saying those things don't necessarily help. Neither one of this is bad. But my model is very simple. And it's a question I like asking. Who was your favorite teacher? You already said your favorite coach. And I've asked this question in English, Espanol, and Portuguese, in Vancouver, in Sao Paulo, in Chile, all over the world. And when I ask this question, people can come up with that answer in about 3 nanoseconds. I bet you already can. You already know your favorite coach. We talked about him. He would certainly suffice for this. Your favorite teacher. Who was your favorite teacher?
Dr. Modaf at Ohio University, a communications teacher.
Communications teacher. Well, yeah. Ryan, what are we doing today?
That was my major in college. Yeah, organizational communication class. And I actually got a C, but I probably worked as hard for that C as any grade I got in college, including many of the A's. But he was so good and made the theory and history of communication to a 20-year-old fascinating, which is almost impossible to a college student. So anyway, I definitely remember him. In fact, I'd like to record with him because he's now teaching somewhere else. But anyway, you're getting me going on good teachers, which are everything. So, but yeah, certainly I remember those classes. I went to all of them because I actually wanted to be there.
You wanted to be there. You had a lot to learn. You were inspired. Yeah. All right. Clearly, you already answered the question in part. Was this professor easy? Clearly, he was not. And his name again, by the way?
Dr. Modaf. M-O-D-A-F-F. D-A-F-F.
D-A-F, Modaf. He was clearly not easy. Did he care about you personally?
Yeah. I felt like he did. I mean, at least it seems so.
Right. He knew your name. He'd stay after class if you needed him. Sure. Extra help, all this stuff. Look, that's it. Where the command and control gets it wrong is they don't care about you. And where the beanbag chairs get it wrong is, what are your standards? So if you have beanbag chairs and no standards, hey, you're a nice soft A, and we all need those in college sometimes, and I took mine. But I don't remember those guys. They don't stay with you. If you're command and control and don't care, man, all you are is a jerk at that point. And those guys get undermined very quickly. You have to do what your favorite teacher did, which is set extremely high standards without apology, but then do everything you possibly can to get your people over that line. And that means you got to care. You got to love them. And another great line from Steve Wasik, guess what? If you don't like your people, guess what? They already know. So you're not going to hide it anyway. And another line from Abraham Lincoln, which I love, is, I don't like that man. I need to get to know him better. So you have to like your people. And if you don't, you have to swap a few out. But it's amazing the ones who drive you nuts at first end up being your biggest backers. The closest guys from my teams are usually the ones I butted heads with. Those are the ones who invite you to their weddings. Now, Stevie and I did not butt heads, but most of them I did at some point. So what you do is, day one, you set your standards. What does it need to be? And set them high. Mediums, let's all go out and be mediocre is not going to motivate anybody. On day one with this team that was 0-22-3 the year before, the worst team in America, coached by the worst player in school history. Ryan, this is a great combination. The coach with no goals with a team with no wins. Yes, there's the combination I'm looking for right there. On day one, I told them 2 things. I said, we are going to be the hardest working high school team in the state of Michigan. That's got to get your attention. No matter how many, I can't promise any wins, but we're doing that on day one. And we are eventually going to win a state title. Won't be your team, but when we do it, that team will give you guys a standing ovation. Daniel Burnham, who basically built the modern Chicago, he said, make no small plans. They lack the power to stir people's souls. So first thing is high bar. And on that, you're very impatient about behaviors, but you're very patient about results. Look, we sucked. We're 0-22-3. We're not, we played Trenton, perennial state champions. They whoop us 13-2. And I'll remind you, Ryan, this is hockey, not football. That is not 2 touchdowns minus an extra point and a safety. These are in increments of 1. So that's an old-fashioned butt kicking. But after the game, I said, we have 2 principles here. Work hard, support your teammates. Did we do those 2 things? And they thought about it and they realized, yes, we did. I said, okay, then I'm cool. All right, so my standards are high. Work hard, support your teammates every minute, every day, no exceptions. That's behaviors. Results, we got to be patient. But 2 years later, we lost 3-2 in the regional final at their place. And Stevie's year as the captain, we finally beat Trenton for the first time in 20 years in their building. So that's what it takes. So behaviors and results. Behaviors, impatient, results, right? It's going to take time to learn this stuff, and you got to be patient.
The high expectations aspect from a leadership perspective. In order to do this, though, in order to expect excellence from others, you have to go first, right? You can't show up late. You can't not be doing extra. You can't expect this of others without going first. And I know this seems, well, obviously, but I've experienced coaches that had this demand. They were more command and control, I guess, now that I think about it, where they expected this, but they weren't going first. And I've also experienced the ones who absolutely went first, the most prepared person every single day. And like we saw that. We saw the example. He wouldn't even have to say it. And we saw it. And I think so from, a business world perspective, if you expect excellence from your team and you set extremely high standards, you have to go first, though. It's got to be on you. You can't expect that from them if you're not doing it too.
Dead on. And that's the catch. What I'm advocating here, I think, is very effective, and I've seen it work teaching also at Miami of Ohio, at the University of Michigan, at Northwestern. I've worked with Insight Global and other corporations like that. This stuff does work. It's timeless. It's your favorite teacher, basically. But guess what? Your favorite teacher worked her tail off, didn't she? She did not show up late. The homework didn't come back 3 weeks later, poorly marked and so on. She was on top of it, and that's why you had to respect her. We had another phrase that they glommed onto. And keep in mind, Ryan, of course, I say a lot of things. You throw out 100 slogans, whatever else, but it's fascinating to see which ones they glom onto. And one of them was this: I work hard for you, you work hard for me. As simple as that is. There are no shortcuts. So in 4 years of here in hockey, all our study tables, our workouts, our practices, our games, I was not late once ever. And you can't be. You just can't be, period. And likewise, I mean, we ran the Michigan Stadium steps. I ran them with them. All right. Now that's not at 55. I don't think I can do that anymore, but I could at 35. So we did that, and they saw that. I didn't realize how important that was until I was writing the book this last year. And guys like Stevie Wasik and Mike Henry and others told me what a big difference that made. So look, they're watching you all the time. If you're the leader, guess what? And you already know this. I see you nodding. You're on stage all the time, whether you believe it or not. If you think you're off stage, you're not off stage. And how you treat your people, how you treat your work, do you show up late? Are you a hypocrite? The second they see any hypocrisy, you've lost them. You can't do it. And you're going to screw up. When you do screw up, you apologize. You don't make it worse. And no apology with an if in it. If I offended, no, stop. Look, I'm married, you're married. Does it work? No, it does not work. You got to apologize, come clean, and they'll respect that. Yeah.
Okay. I want to dig into the book. So it's broken down into 3 parts. We've covered some of the parts here, but I'm going to dig into some other areas that we haven't yet. And part 1's about changing culture, or changing the culture, which is a thing that a lot of leaders are going through. Perhaps you've gotten promoted, or you got hired to a different company where you hadn't previously worked. In your case, getting hired to be a coach that was previously a really bad team, the worst team in the country. And I think that the first principle here that I wanted to cover is to make it special to be on your team, make it hard to be on your team. And you referenced Navy SEALs, like how hard it is to become one of those. And I love this part. Share how to implement this as, let's say, a mid-level leader within a business, to make it special to be on your team, make it hard to be on your team. Like there's a selection process, so to speak.
Al Clark was my mentor at Culver Academies in Indiana, middle of nowhere. This guy is a Phi Beta Kappa math major from UNH, New Hampshire. He was All-American there, I believe. NHL and the WHA back then, 50 years ago, came after him. 2 bad shoulders, couldn't play pro hockey. Was going to be a dentist until he gets a call saying, start our program at Culver Academies. Again, 45 minutes south of South Bend. This is not a hockey haven by any means. This is basketball country. Got an outdoor rink and 12 Hispanic kids who'd never skated before, bought them skates in South Bend. 3 years in their 3rd year with Gary Suter and with Skeeter Moore, and then eventually Gary Suter on the team, NHL Rookie of the Year. They are the state champions, and they've been the state champions ever since. 8 years in a row. Then they sent their B team, and now I think they sent their C team to win the state title. He won more games, 1,017, than any other high school coach in the nation. Coach of the year nationwide. Quiet guy, just like me, of course. And I did the yelling for him. But I asked him when I took over the team, the Huron River Rats, I said, okay, Al, I'm in deep. I'm like the dog who chases the car, and I caught the damn car. Now what? I don't have keys, a wallet, or opposable thumbs. How do I do this? And he says, here's what you do at Huron. You have to make it special to play for Huron. And I made a joke saying, yeah, well, we're already the worst team in America. That's pretty special. He ignores my joke, and he says the best way to make it special is to make it hard. And that was the exact opposite advice that everybody else was giving me. Everyone else was telling me you need to give them fancy sweats and a cool locker room and go on cool trips and cool buses. And we did a lot of those things eventually, but not at first. And I thought about it, and you brought up the Navy SEALs example. The Navy SEALs take 6% of those who apply, and it's not pikers who are applying to be Navy SEALs. Those guys are already self-selected. A lot of football players, in fact, in that crowd. They take 6% of those, and 3/4 of those, I believe, wash out. The Peace Corps takes 1 out of 6, and those jobs, pay crap basically. And Navy SEAL, $54,000 a year. And if you're a famous Navy SEAL, you're probably a dead one. You don't want that, obviously. So very demanding. You're not rich, you're not famous, and yet the wait list is incredibly long. Why? And the answer is they are offering a mission. The difficulty itself is advertised as a plus, not a minus. They are unapologetic about their high standards. The New York Yankees, same thing. Harvard Law School, same thing. The bar is extremely high. Hey, I'll give you Ohio State football. How's that, Ryan? Is extremely high, and you got to play within that. So they don't apologize for it. And he's right. And then he said, once the players know that they have to do something that not everybody would do to make your team, they feel special to be on that team. And then with a little guidance, they will instill the culture themselves with those who follow. The hardest year for me by far was the first year, because I'm teaching everybody, seniors through freshmen. After that, I'm only teaching freshmen, because the seniors, juniors, and sophomores already know how this program runs. And that's how the New York Yankees run also. I was talking to Joe Torre about this, and I noticed that in other ballparks, other spring training facilities, and so I've been about half of the major league ones, the Tigers, the Indians, and so on, hats are on backwards and shirts are untucked and sleeves are torn and all this stuff. It took me 2 or 3 days at the Yankees to realize that that never happens in the Yankees spring training facility in Tampa. And I asked one of the players, I said, why is this? He says, because you're a Yankee. Because the AAA minor league ball player will kick the AA minor league ball player's butt for not kicking the butt of the single A ball player for wearing your hat on backwards because, damn it, you're a Yankee. And I asked Joe Torre, what would ever happen if you saw a player with his hat on backwards or shirt untucked? And he looked at me as though I had 2 heads. He said, and he's a nice guy, but he said, I would never see that because it would get corrected long before it ever got to me. Joe Torre messes with the lineup. He doesn't mess around with caps on backwards. So once we had our culture going at Huron, the seniors instilled it. I had to do very little of that. So it becomes theirs, and now you got a good thing going because now we are truly all on the same team. Not me versus the players. It's all of us against Trenton or Pioneer or our opponents, but we are together.
That leads me to one of the other principles, which is reduce your rules, but make them stick. Make your rules few, clear, and connected to your larger mission. They don't have to be easy to follow, but they have to be simple and within everyone's control. And then, as you mentioned, when your people start enforcing the rules, that's when the culture has changed. I love this part of the book because when you start stacking a bunch of rules, it's basically like if you have 20 priorities, you have none, right? If you have 25 rules, you have none, right? You have to choose, just like with your values, your shared values, your personal values. You got to choose. You got to make hard choices. Can you talk more about this in maybe the sports world and the business world when it comes to fewer rules, but make them stick?
Absolutely. And look, I mean, the old joke about quarterbacks, right? If you have 3 quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback.
Right.
So you have to make choices. They are tough. And you hit the nail on the head. Your rules have got to be simple and few. They don't have to be easy, but they've got to be simple. I figured out my 2 rules, really principles. but I called them rules. Leaving the Michigan hockey rink one night, playing with Rob Palmer and some other former Michigan players. He played in the NHL, got his MBA, one of these stalwarts. And he said his dad told him as a kid in Toronto that all you have to do is work hard and support your teammates. And I got home and I wrote that down. I was not yet the Huron coach. I was a few months away from that. But I thought, if I ever become the coach, that's what I want to do. And that's all I want to do. And I told them that in a letter to them when I became the coach before I met them. I instilled that every day, every single day. I'm not kidding you. No exceptions. And Waska will tell you how manic I was about this. And I'd tell them, what's the first rule? And they'd yell it back, work hard. Second rule, support your teammates. And that's it. Because almost everything you can think of falls under one of those two and often both. And you can't tell me, is working hard not important? Who can tell you that with a straight face? Who can tell you with a straight face that supporting your teammates is not that big a deal? All right, these are both obvious. We can do them every day without exception, not dependent on the opponent, the weather, the referees, anything we're dealing with. And that's got to be true in your company as well. What do you control every day? You don't control the stock price. You don't control what General Motors is going to do today. You don't control the weather, what the Chinese are going to do, all this stuff. You do control working hard and supporting your teammates. And tell me that would not have an impact in your organization right now. If you knew every single day in your organization that your people are going to work hard and support your teammates, man, that solves a whole lot of problems right off the bat. But here's the catch to it. You got to mean it. So if you beat a team 6-1 that you're supposed to beat, and I hear some sniping on the bench, or a guy is coasting back to the bench on a shift, no, that is not, I don't care if we won the damn game. All right, I'm not going to be fooled by the numbers, the stock price, the quarterly returns, whatever you got. We did not do what we said we stand for. Not just we're going to, this is who we are. This is our identity. So no, you ain't going to like Monday after that one. We're going to reinstill our values. The flip side is when we got our butts handed to us by Trenton 13-2, and by the end of that game, Ryan, we all knew their damn fight song. That's how bad that one was. 13 goals will do that. I know the fight song. We all know the fight song. And there's a phenomenal team. We knew that going in. That's where we were at that point. We had won 3 games already, but that's the best team in the state. And that's how big the gap was. So when you got to the locker room, these guys are throwing their gloves and sticks and they're cussing and saying it's, no better than last year. I said, hey, stop. What's the first rule of Huron hockey? And they mumble it. They say, work hard. No. What's the first rule? We start yelling it back and forth. And I say, did we do that tonight? And they thought about it. And they thought, well, actually, we did do that tonight. We did it for 45 minutes. That's how long our games go. I said, that's really hard when you're getting your butts handed to you 13-2. And I'm not spinning that. All right, that's hard to do. What's the second rule? Support your teammates. We start yelling that back and forth. Well, did we? I think about that. And I thought, actually, we did. We supported the goalie after every goal. We didn't point the finger at the defense for 13 goals. We didn't point the fingers at the offense for only 2 goals for us. I said, right, it will never be harder to do these 2 principles than it was tonight, and you did it. Everything's going to be easier after this, but these are non-negotiable. Behaviors you can always control. Performance you can't. Pucks bounce. So do football. So do stock prices. Weird things happen. These days with COVID, staffing, supply chains, look, there are a lot of excuses already built in, but there's no excuse for not working hard. There's no excuse for not supporting your teammates. So we kept it simple, but those 2 things were non-negotiable. And when we beat them in our 4th year, 4-3 in their building, I went in the same locker room and I said, gentlemen, with a wink in my eye, because some of those guys had been on that team. And I said, what's the first rule of Huron hockey? We all just laughed because that got us to actually beat the Trenton Trojans. And they went on to win another state title. That was not a cheesy team. So we didn't win a state title ourselves, but we're in that category. But it's all based on 2 very simple but hard things to do. And don't forget, I have to do them also. I got to work hard. I've got to support teammates. I've got to apologize once in a while for snapping at a kid or one of those things. So it applies to you as well.
I love it's a process-oriented goal, right? And you can control
every day
how you show up when you have process-oriented goals. You won't always control the outcome. You won't always control the performance. Things happen, but you can control your attitude, your work ethic, how you respond to adversity. You can control those things. And I think that's a great lesson. And that applies worldwide, regardless of sports or off the ice in the business world, you can control those things. And so that's why I think setting process-oriented goals, values-based goals are really effective. Now, you have to stay consistent. You have to stay true to them. You have to live up to them. It doesn't happen overnight, but I love that part. I'm going to jump to part 2 of your book which is focused on building trust. And one of the sections is you can't motivate people you don't know. And I love this because I always use this get to know you form, which then leads to a really long form one-on-one conversation after we both do some written work separately. And you write, leadership doesn't require rousing speeches. It requires you to get to know your people. When you do, you can make tough calls with conviction. Your people will gain confidence. And I think while this again may sound obvious, it isn't. When we've all had bosses who had no intention and didn't even try to get to know us. We were a number. We needed to produce something. And if we didn't, we got yelled at. If we did, okay, moving on to the next one. And I find the leaders that I want to commit to, the ones that I love and think about, are the ones that were like this, that they genuinely cared about me and they cared about getting to know about me. And this is a part of your book when it comes to building trust. I'd love to hear more about this and how you implemented this, both sports-wise and off the ice.
Exactly right. And look, I mean, think back to your favorite teacher. He or she knew you. Think about your favorite boss, supervisor, chairperson. They knew you and they spent time with you outside, maybe a happy hour, maybe paintball. I don't know what it was. But there are a million ways to get to know somebody outside of the office. Those things always help. Even a chat by the water cooler. Much harder these days with COVID, I realize. But these things all build trust. But I recall when I left my bank, I'll leave the name out of it, to a local bank. I asked the guy on the way out, he asked me, why are you moving your money? Not that I have a fortune, mind you, but I said, do you know my name? He goes, no. I go, they do. See ya. It was about that simple. I mean, your rates are all about the same. I mean, but they got Tootsie Rolls at the counter. They know my name. The president comes out and talks to me, this kind of stuff. Yeah, it makes a difference. And it makes a difference to your people as well. You have to know them, because otherwise, why am I working that hard for you? You don't work that hard for strangers. And they tell you, by the way, if you're ever kidnapped, this is an extreme case, hopefully it should not happen on the job, but the Stockholm Syndrome. If you're ever kidnapped, the first thing you do is start telling your kidnapper about you. I've got a wife, I've got 2 kids, I'm from Ann Arbor, this and that, because you're harder to kill when they know you. Dropping a bomb in a city, not that hard, okay, psychologically in many ways, but killing somebody you know, let's hope it's very hard. So likewise in the office, an extreme case perhaps, Ryan. But if I know you, you're going to come. You're going to turn around. If you know me, coach, I'm going to turn around like that. Let's talk. You want some time after practice? Let's get it. Now, after you talk to me like this, first of all, by the way, that's how you find out what the hell is going on with your team. Is these conversations, you find out a lot more than you probably expected. This is how it works. If I have a question, I don't guess about it. I ask the captain or somebody to come in here and say, am I right about this? And they'll say, yeah, because now we have a trust built up that I talk to them, they talk to me. And Bobby Chapius, whose grandfather, was a Heisman Trophy runner-up in '47, he said his favorite moments, and he played for Lake Forest College, his favorite moments were after practice. I just pull some guys in and shoot the breeze for half an hour just to hang out. But in that process, I learn about them and they learn about me. And now it's time for me to ask for something. Look, I need more. I need more out of you, Bobby Chapius, and I know you, and you know me. I help you with your homework at study table, all right? And now I need more, and here's what I need. Is Bobby going to respond? Oh, heck yeah. We're already invested in each other. And without that, you have nothing to draw on.
Yeah. In the third part of the book, which is letting them lead, off of the title, you write that the more power you give, the more power you get. And I think this is missed often from a leadership perspective. What do you mean by the more power you give, the more power you get?
Well, first of all, as you pointed out, I don't start out with kombucha machines and beanbag chairs. We start out, it looks like command and control at first, if you didn't know better. So I got very high demands and so on. But once they know those things and they can drive the car themselves, then you hand the keys to them, but only after you know they know how to drive the car. So that's crucial. But the more I gave them, the more responsibility they had for each other. And they liked that. We'd be working out on the football field and the AD might come down for a little chat. And I'd say, captains, your team. And I'd talk to the AD for 4 or 5 minutes. And I'd come back and say, you see what you did? You didn't miss a beat. And I love that about you guys, that I can go away for 5 minutes and not even think about you guys slacking off or doing it wrong. You guys did it better probably for each other than you did for me. And that's the accountability you want. The extreme case, as you know, too many penalties. I would get out the rusty chair, put it at center ice in the score sheet, and call out number 17, Dan Sheldon, 2 minutes tripping. He'd sit in that chair, and everybody else, including the coaches, would skate all the way to the end, hit the glass, and skate all the way back. And somebody would say, why the hell are we skating? He got the penalty. I said, what happens in hockey? He gets the penalty. He's sitting down for 2 minutes. You're skating. So if he's on our team, we got to skate for him. The guilt that guy feels, the accountability is overwhelming. And I don't have to say a word after that because his teammates are already giving him the death stare, and he feels bad. The next game, we never had more than 3 penalties. One game, no penalties. So that instills them taking over the team. Another example, my third year, when Stevie was a junior, we had a 14-game unbeaten streak, pretty doggone good. We're number 4 in the state. Lost 2 tight games to Trenton and to Pioneer, our 2 rivals. What are we going to do? I put the seniors in charge of the entire game. I called up the captain, Chris Fragner. I said, hey, from the time you get there, the time you go home, you're in charge of the lineup, the pregame speech, shifting all the guys, the power play, the penalty kill, and talking to the Ann Arbor News after the game is over. And they beat a very good team, 6-0, and the 0 impressed me the most because they played team defense for each other. When you really get it going, they'll do that, and they want to do that. Responsibility is far better than a beanbag chair. Responsibility motivates. Beanbag chair is nice, but responsibility motivates.
All right, to close, I'm going to circle back to some of the other things Wasik said, and then ask one final question.
Ryan, we both knew this had to happen, didn't we?
Off of that, this is a good part. I saved some good stuff for you. He said he's been a huge mentor for me and is the only mentor I've had who has had influence across all stages of my professional career. And he also said he's the best public speaker I've ever heard. 2 really cool things. Off of that, when you're a mentor for somebody that is an extremely impressive leader in their own right, I have to ask you, John, what are some general pieces of life/career advice that you would give to somebody perhaps a little bit earlier in their career to help them leave their own dent in the world, to help them make an impact on other people? What are some general pieces you'd share?
Great question. First of all, Stevie, thank you very much for those kind words. Of course, I'm working for him sometimes these days at Insight Global, and that's pretty cool. He's been my boss a couple times. It's been interesting. Awesome. He's a hell of a boss, by the way. I'm pleased to report. So the rules have switched. What would I say going out? I would say focus on yourself first. Don't worry about your boss. Don't worry about your colleagues in terms of what they're saying, what they're doing, and so on. You know yourself. And I'd honestly start with work hard and support your teammates. Are you doing those things first? And let's not worry about the raises yet, the promotions. Let's do a good job first. If I'm doing those 2 things, all right, is that working or not? If it's not working at all, you might be in the wrong place with the wrong boss. That does happen, and sometimes you got to move. But if you're doing those things well out of the chute, chances are a lot of good things start happening. What boss does not want to have an employee who shows up every day doing those 2 things? So focus on the things that you can control and don't get caught up in all the other stuff. And also keep in mind, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And Stevie's a great example. He was a good salesperson, recruiter at Insight Global early on, but he was slow in his class compared to others to go to the next level. It took him, I think, twice as long as the other ones. And I said, hey, are you getting better at your job? Bo Schembechler, every day you get better or you get worse. And I guarantee you he stole that from Woody Hayes. So every day you get better or you get worse. Are you getting better? All right, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so he kept on doing it. And then he started getting some promotions. And then he started passing up all the guys who had been in front of him. Because I think back to our grinder thing early on, Scotty Bowman and guys like this and Bill Belichick, Stevie knew both sides of the equation. And now he's a tremendous motivator. And now he's, 34 years old and a vice president at Insight Global. 34 is pretty damn young. Be a vice president of any $2.5 billion company. So it tells you that, what was that? That was, 8-9 years. Not a big deal. So be patient with results, but not with your own behaviors.
Love it. John, man, I really appreciate you investing your time. It was cool when Megan connected us to do this one. I was looking forward to it and to digging into your work, and just really appreciate it. I'd love for you and I to continue this dialogue as we both progress. The book is called Let Them Lead: Unexpected Lessons in Leadership from America's Worst High School Hockey Team. Good cover. Here it is for the visual people watching. But I really appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for being here.
Ryan, ditto to everything. We'll talk again soon. Thank you so much. Hey, you're one of my heroes, by the way. Love the podcast.
Wow. Well, thank you. It means a lot. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
All right.